You want the polyurethane on your projects to look this good? Glass smooth, nice and shiny. Stick around, I'll show you how to do it. Okay, the desk project is coming along. It took me several weeks, at least 2 weeks I had to wait until the final coat of polyurethane really cured properly. But now I'm on to polishing, and this is a new area for me, and I've been learning some really interesting things. So I'm going to take you through the process I'm using to polish. I actually experimented 3 different times, so these 3 drawers have been polished using different techniques. Now I'm going to do the 4th one, and I'm going to walk you through in detail how I do this. When I feel this, it's kind of a rough surface. I feel the old bubbles and stuff. And as context, there are 15 coats, light coats, of polyurethane that were put onto this desk over time. Typically between no more than 2 coats, I would do some type of sanding to take down the bubbles and the roughness. So, the roughness I feel here is from the last 2 coats that I put on it. So really the polishing is intended to get rid of all that roughness, try to get the surface as smooth as possible, and give it as much gloss as we can. Now I did use a semi-gloss on this, so I don't expect, a lot of gloss out of it. But, at a proper angle, you ought to be able to catch a glass-like reflection off of it. So I'll take you through the tools that I'm using, kind of the tools of the trade, and the process I'm using. I actually have these drawers mounted in the desk, propped up from the back, so I can work out. This holds them stable. It's just making it easier to work with. These are the tools I'm using. I'm using some Quad Zero steel wool. So when you look at steel wool, there's a grading system. This one is the finest, Quad Zero, and it's really more for buffing and polishing. I have 4 different grades of sandpaper: a 400, 1000, 2000, and 3000. And you can see they've all been used already. I try to keep them as clean as I can, but obviously they're picking up residue. And I use an oscillating sander. Now this tool, first time on this particular project, first time I've ever used one of these. It's a wonderful tool. If you're going to do furniture, wood finishing, you really want an oscillating sander, and you want one that's variable speed, because when I'm doing this process I have it on the slowest speed. And then I have 3 different grades of polish. Now I happen to be using automotive polish because that's what I have, and it goes from the most coarse to the least coarse. Really the polishing is down here, and I use a different brush for each one. And the way I think of it is it's kind of the most stiff down to the least stiff. I mean, this one's very flexible. So, and since they accumulate polish, I just use 3 different brushes. And then right now I'm using my cordless drill to do the polishing, but that's because I'm working on the drawers. I don't really like using it that much. You don't have a lot of control over it, but it's doing just fine for now. So I'm not going to go out and get the bigger polisher yet. I'll use that when I get to the sides and so forth. First step I'm doing is to work the edges of the drawers, somewhere that I'm not going to get the sander on. And I'm using this Quad Zero steel wool, and I'm just rubbing it and taking down any of the bumps that I can get, Now, if they're real radical bumps, I may not, be able to do much about it. But, this is an area where taking the power sander to it is just going to be too aggressive and too likely to, take us too deep into the surface. So I find this steel wool, it does a pretty nice job. I'm also trying to keep the steel wool off of this surface. Not that it really matters, but I don't want to put any more abrasion on this edge than I need to, because the edges are the most likely where you're going to cut too deep into the polyurethane or your finish. By the way, this is polishing for polyurethane. I have no idea if polishing lacquer would be the same process. But I may find that out when I get to my next desk, which I am doing with lacquer, but this one's polyurethane. Okay. Another important tool is to have some rags, because you want to wipe all this. You want to wipe this down good after every step. Feels fine. I also have some water on hand. Now I'm ready for the 400 grit. I'm going to make sure this disc is wet, because I am using a wet sanding approach just to, you know, reduce the abrasion a bit. I'm not putting much pressure at all on here. I'm really just holding the sander up against it. I don't want to press into it too much. And that's about it for that. You know, all I'm trying to do is take off those real high spots. And you can see how that gets hazy like that, so you can see where you're cutting into the polyurethane. But at this point, you know, you shouldn't be able to feel any obvious bumps and so forth on it. Okay. This is the 1000 now. Sorry, I keep hitting my tripod with my cord. See, we're not on there very long, and I'm not really putting any pressure on. I'm just holding the sander up there. Okay, I'm up to 2000 now. You notice when I wipe that off, you don't see as much haze anymore. Okay, 3000. Okay, so after the 3000, this ought to feel really nice and smooth. Now we're ready to start moving on to the actual polish itself. Now these polishing discs, I try to keep them just a little damp, and you don't use much polish at all. It just doesn't need that much, certainly considering how small the surface is. And for, this first one, I'm not using a lot of speed either. Now, what I'm doing with the polishing is I'm going to work these edges a little bit with the polish. And, also the other thing I'm trying to do is, to get it in here as best I can, I try to cut it with the side that's, the wheel is just moving in this way when I'm polishing it. down after each one. You want to get that coarser grit off of there before you start the next grit each time, because you're going to finer and finer. Okay, now we just got one more polish to go. Final polish. This is already starting to, you know, have a nice reflection to it when I look at the angle, even though it's a semi-gloss polyurethane. Now on this one I do crank up the speed a little bit. You know, this is the final polish to get some shine. I can see my reflection in here now. This is where I start to get excited about the results. All right, put our final wipe down. This rag is getting pretty damp. I need to get another one that's dry. But I'll tell you, that, wow, from here, this looks great. This one down here was my first experiment, and you know, I can already tell you I'm not particularly happy with this. So I'm probably going to rework this drawer a bit, particularly in the edges here, to get this looking better. I want them to all be consistent. So there you go. I know that was probably a kind of a long drawn out process, but I wanted you to see, you know, what you can do with it. And you know, that, boy, that feels nice to me. So I'm really happy with it. We'll have a cautionary tale for you regarding polishing. This is a piece of mahogany of another piece of furniture I'm working on. I brought this down to experiment with polishing. This happens to be done with a spray lacquer. I have 3 coats on here, and I wanted to see how it would respond to polishing. And this is what it looks like when I'm done spraying it. It's not bad. I mean, one thing that, you know, I can definitely see is that, you know, I can still feel the grain here. So the finish is not built up to the, you know, the same level that the polyurethane was on that last desk, which is no surprise given that that had 15 coats of polyurethane on it. Well, I went to go ahead and polish. The sanding was fine, but once I got to the first level of polish, what actually happened is all that polish residue got trapped down inside the grain, and there's really no way I can get that out of there. So yeah, if you could still feel your grain, you might want to be careful about, you know, the polishing approach you use. And I guess at this point, I got a little painful reevaluation here, but I guess I'm going to have to sand this back down and redo this one piece. And I'm sure I'll have to, you know, restain it and respray it, and then decide, you know, how I'm going to proceed with the rest of the piece. Well, I hope you liked that video about how to make your polyurethane look this nice. And I really would appreciate if you would subscribe to the channel, because I've got more videos I'm trying to put together, and hopefully I can show you some stuff that will be helpful to you. Take care now.